I had done it so many times before. The quick rush of excitement, the smooth, familiar lies, the thrill of knowing that my husband had no idea what I was doing in our own bed. I thought I was untouchable, until I walked through the front door that night and saw the table set for two. Candles flickered, wine glasses half filled, the scent of roasted garlic and expensive steak hanging in the air. Mark looked up from his seat at the head of the table, a slow smile spreading across his lips. "You're late." Something in his voice made my stomach twist. "What's all this?" He gestured across the table, and that's when I saw her. Long dark hair, perfect makeup, red lips curled into the kind of smirk I usually gave when I knew I had the upper hand. She was beautiful and comfortable, too comfortable. "Meet Vanessa," Mark said, swirling his wine. "She's going to be staying with us." I forced out a laugh, but my throat was dry. "What kind of joke is this?" Mark tilted his head. "A joke." "No, sweetheart, this is fairness, balance. You had your fun, I decided it's my turn, and unlike you, I'm not hiding it." The room spun. No, this wasn't real. He was bluffing. He was trying to rattle me. Vanessa stood, stretching in a way that made her dress ride just a little higher up her toned thighs. "I hope this isn't awkward," she purred, stepping closer. "Mark, been so generous. I think we're going to have a lot of fun together." Heat prickled up my neck. This wasn't happening. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. "You're out of your mind if you think I'm going to sit here and let you." "Let me what?" Mark interrupted, his voice cool, amused. "Enjoy my own home the same way you did, or is the problem that now you're the one who's left out?" He leaned forward, tapping his fingers against the table. "You thought I didn't know, didn't you? Thought you were so clever, sneaking around like I was some blind idiot. I let you think that. I let you dig your own grave. And now."
By the way, if you're curious about what happened next, subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Thank you.
"Well, now I've decided to change the rules." Vanessa ran a finger. My skin burned, every nerve in my body screaming at me to walk out, to throw something, to do anything but sit here and let them toy with me. But that's what they wanted. That's what Mark wanted. I clenched my jaw, forcing my expression into something unreadable. "You're serious about this? You think bringing some," I gestured toward Vanessa, who was now smirking, "random woman into our house is going to make us even?" Mark chuckled, taking a slow sip of his wine. "Oh, Vanessa isn't random. She's been around for a while, and unlike you, she knew exactly what she was getting into." He set his glass down, locking eyes with me. I figured if my wife was going to humiliate me, I might as well make the most of it. Vanessa slid into the chair beside him, running a finger along the rim of her glass. You know, he didn't even hesitate. I thought maybe he'd need convincing, but no, her lips curled. Turns out he was just waiting for an excuse. A pit opened in my stomach. This wasn't just revenge, this was punishment. He wasn't trying to hurt me, he was trying to erase me. I crossed my arms, refusing to let my voice shake. "You really think this is going to work, that I'll just sit here and watch you parade her around like some kind of prize?" "No," Mark said smoothly. "I think you'll sit here and realize what it feels like to be powerless. The way I felt every time you walked through that door with someone else's scent on you. The way I felt when I saw the proof." My throat tightened. "You're pathetic." Mark only smiled. "And you're predictable." Vanessa let out a soft laugh, twirling a strand of her dark hair around her finger. "So what's it going to be, storming out in tears, begging him to reconsider, or?" She tilted her head, eyes glinting with something wicked. "Are you curious?" I stiffened. "Curious?" She leaned closer, voice a hushed whisper. "What it's like to be on the other side." My nails dug into my palm. My marriage had already shattered, my dignity hanging by a thread, and now sitting in my own home at my own table, I had never felt more like a stranger. But one thing was clear, Mark wanted to watch me break. He wanted to see me crack under the weight of his game, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I reached for the untouched glass of wine in front of me, took a slow sip, and met Vanessa's gaze with a smirk of my own. "I don't think you're ready for that answer." The tension in the room thickened, Vanessa's smirk faltering for just a second before she regained control. Mark watched me closely, his grip tightening around his glass. He thought I'd crumble. He thought I'd scream, throw a tantrum, beg him to stop, but he underestimated me. Vanessa leaned back, swirling her wine. "I like her," she purred, glancing at Mark. "She's got fight in her." "She always did," Mark murmured, his eyes locked on mine. That's what made the betrayal so much fun to unravel. I exhaled through my nose, tilting my head. "You act like this is a game, Mark, but tell me, how does it feel to know that even after all this, you still had to bring in someone else just to try to get even?" I let my words sink in, watching the flicker of irritation flash in his eyes. "That says more about you than it does about me." Mark's jaw twitched, but Vanessa only laughed, clearly enjoying the show. "Oh, darling, he's not trying to get even. He's just finally doing what he wants. And you." She trailed a finger along the edge of her plate. "You're just here to watch." I set my glass down with deliberate ease. "You keep telling me that, but it's funny because right now I'm the only one not performing." My gaze flicked between them. "You're trying so hard to make me jealous, to hurt me, but I've already done my damage, and no matter what happens here, you'll always know I did it first." Mark inhaled sharply, and for the first time I saw it, the crack in his composure. The anger behind his carefully placed smirk. He thought he had flipped the script, but the truth was he still cared, and that was my power. Vanessa, sensing the shift, leaned forward, amusement flickering in her eyes. Then maybe we should stop talking about the past and start focusing on the present. Her lips curved into something dangerous. What do you say? Should we make this a little more interesting? Mark's grip on his glass tightened, but he didn't stop her. He didn't say no. He was waiting for my reaction. I smiled slowly, dragging my finger along the rim of my glass. Oh, sweetheart, you really have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Vanessa's smirk widened as she leaned in, her perfume thick in the air between us. I think I can handle whatever you've got, darling. The real question is, can you? Mark remained silent, his jaw tight, his fingers curling around the stem of his glass. He wanted me to break, he wanted to watch me flinch, but I had played this game far longer than him and I wasn't going to fold now. I tilted my head, letting my eyes flick lazily between them. Oh, Vanessa, you think you're so clever. But here's the thing, you're a guest in my home, and guests, they don't dictate the rules. Her eyes flashed, amusement still there but now edged with something sharper. And yet I don't see you doing anything to stop me. I leaned forward, slow, deliberate, resting my chin on my hand. That's because I don't need to stop you, I've already won. Mark let out a scoff. You really believe that? Sitting here across from me with her in my house? What exactly do you think you've won? Smiled, slow and wicked. Your attention, and isn't that what this is really about? My voice dropped to a whisper just for him. You needed me to see this, to react, to hurt, because no matter how much you pretend otherwise, you still care what I think. Vanessa laughed, but I could hear the thin layer of irritation beneath it. You're cute, delusional, but cute. I turned to her, my smile unwavering. You should be thanking me. Without me, he never would have noticed you. You're a rebound, sweetheart. A toy he picked up to get back at me, but deep down, you know he's still mine. Mark tensed, barely, but I caught it. So did she. Vanessa's lips parted, her confidence flickering. She turned to Mark as if searching for reassurance. But Mark was looking at me, watching, waiting. And that was all the confirmation I needed. I reached for my glass, taking a slow sip before standing. Enjoy your little performance. But just know this, when you finally realize you're not playing the lead role in his story, don't come crying to me. I walked away, leaving the candles flickering, the wine half drunk, and the delicious taste of my victory lingering on my lips. I didn't go far, I wanted to. My body screamed for me to slam the door, walk out, make him chase me, or better yet, make him regret ever trying to play this game with me. But I stayed. I heard Vanessa's voice first, low and sharp. Are you really going to let her walk away like that? Silence. A beat too long, then Mark exhaled, slow and controlled. She wants me to stop her. She wants to know she still matters. I'm not giving her that satisfaction. I smirked to myself. Oh, Mark. Still pretending, still playing checkers when I was already 5 moves ahead. I leaned against the hallway wall, waiting, counting the seconds before I heard the inevitable, Vanessa's chair scraping back, her heels clicking against the floor as she followed. She wasn't here for him. She was here to win, and right now she wasn't winning. You think this is funny? Her voice was smooth, calculated. You act like you've already won, but let me tell you something, Mark, done with you. You're the past. I turned to face her, tilting my head. And yet here you are, running after me like a scared little girl. Her eyes narrowed. I just want to make something clear. I'm not some passing distraction. I'm here to stay, and Mark, he's already mine. I let a slow smile curl my lips. Then why do you sound so desperate to convince me? She stiffened, her nails digging into her arms as she crossed them. You don't intimidate me. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Oh, sweetheart, I don't need to. You're already afraid. Afraid that no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to play this role, you'll never be me. You'll always be second place, and you know it. For the first time, Vanessa faltered. The mask cracked just for a second. Behind her, Mark appeared in the doorway, watching, waiting. Always waiting. I smiled at him, slow and deliberate. Enjoy your little game, Mark, but just remember, no one plays me better than I play myself. And you. You're still just a fool trying to keep up. Then I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving them both drowning in the mess they thought they had created for me. The next morning, I woke up tangled in sheets that weren't mine, in a bed that smelled of sweat and recklessness. My lover's arm was draped lazily over my waist, his breath warm against my shoulder. I had barely slept, my mind running through every possible way to burn Mark's carefully constructed fantasy to the ground. I slipped out of bed, grabbing my phone. A single message from an unknown number waited for me. Did you have fun? My pulse ticked up. My fingers hovered over the screen. Whoever it was, they were watching. But was it Mark, Vanessa, or someone else entirely? I deleted the message and turned to see him watching me from the bed, propped up on one elbow. You look dangerous this morning. I smirked, tossing my phone onto the dresser. Good, that means I'm thinking clearly. He sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. You ready to tell me why you really came here last night? I leaned against the dresser, crossing my arms. Let's just say Mark thinks he's the only one who can play dirty. He forgot who he married. His lips curled into a lazy grin. So what's the next move? I exhaled, rolling my shoulders back. If Mark wants to show off his new toy, I say we give him a reason to regret it. You in? He laughed, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. I thought you'd never ask. By the time I walked through the doors of the restaurant that evening, I was glowing, dressed to kill, confidence oozing from every step. I knew Mark would be here, I had made sure of it. I spotted them immediately, Mark and Vanessa, sitting at the best table in the house, pretending to be untouchable. Poor girl, she really thought she had one. I made my way to the bar, feeling my lover's presence just behind me, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. Mark's eyes found us almost instantly, and I saw it, the flicker of something dangerous, something unspoken. He hadn't expected this. I leaned in close to my date, letting my lips brush against his ear as I laughed at something meaningless, my fingers trailing up his arm. I didn't need to look at Mark to know he was seething. Checkmate, darling. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, placing a hand on Mark's arm. Ignore her, that's what she wants. Mark's jaw tight. Oh, I know. But the truth was he couldn't, because no matter what he told himself, no matter how much he wanted to believe otherwise, this wasn't over. And I wasn't done playing yet. The tension in the restaurant was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel Mark's gaze burning into me even as I pretended not to notice. He thought he was in control. He thought this was his game. But the moment he reacted, the moment his jaw clenched, his fingers twitched, his eyes flickered with something dangerous, that was the moment I knew I had him. Vanessa leaned in, whispering something in his ear, but he barely responded. She felt it too, the shift. The crack in the illusion she thought she had wrapped around him. I smirked, lifting my glass in a slow, deliberate toast in their direction before taking a sip, letting the bitter burn of liquor coat my tongue. My lover chuckled beside me. This is fun to watch. I didn't realize revenge could be this entertaining. I traced my fingers along the rim of my glass. Oh, darling, this isn't revenge, not yet. Before he could respond, Mark stood. His movements were controlled, careful, too careful. He wasn't about to storm over like some jealous fool. No, Mark wasn't the type to lose his temper in public. He was the type to plot, to strike when it hurt the most. But I wasn't afraid, I was ready. He made his way toward the bar, ignoring Vanessa's protests as she reached for his hand. I turned slightly, just enough to meet his eyes as he stopped beside me. Enjoying yourself? His voice was smooth, practiced, but there was something simmering beneath it, something dangerous. Smiled, tilting my head. Immensely you. His lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. You always did love an audience. I exhaled a quiet laugh, setting my glass down. Takes one to know one, darling. His jaw ticked. I had him. He hated that I wasn't breaking, that I wasn't begging. He hated that I was the one in control now. What's your end game here? He asked, voice low. You think parading him around is going to change anything? I leaned in, close enough that only he could hear. Oh, Mark. Sweet, predictable Mark, this isn't about changing anything. This is about reminding you that you never had control in the first place. For a split second, I saw it, raw, unfiltered anger flashing in his eyes. He covered it quickly, but I had already seen too much. He exhaled sharply, stepping back. Be careful, sweetheart. You might enjoy this game, but we both know how it ends. I picked up my drink again, swirling the liquid. Do we? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm the one having all the fun. Mark didn't respond. He turned and walked back to Vanessa, but not before I saw the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his fingers curled into fists at his sides. He was losing grip, and he knew it. I smiled to myself. The night was still young, and I wasn't finished yet. The night was still young, but I wanted to make it last. Mark had walked away, but I knew he wasn't done. He couldn't be, not when he just tasted the bitterness of losing control. I turned to my lover, placing a hand on his chest, letting my fingers trail over his collarbone as I leaned in. Let's give them something to really talk about. He smirked, understanding exactly what I meant. I like the way you think. With deliberate ease, I let my lips brush against his jaw, my laugh soft and sultry as I whispered something only he could hear. But I wasn't whispering for him, I was whispering for Mark, and it worked. I felt his gaze snap back to me, his fists tightening in his lap. Vanessa was still talking, trying to reclaim his attention, but he wasn't listening. He was watching. He was unraveling, and I was savoring every second of it. I pulled back, my eyes locking with Mark's across the restaurant, a silent challenge in my gaze. He had tried to humiliate me, to put me in my place, but instead he was the one sitting there, seething, powerless to stop the fire he had ignited. Vanessa finally caught on, her expression shifting from smug confidence to something closer to unease. She gripped his arm, her voice sharper now, demanding, "Mark, stop watching her." He blinked, shaking himself out of it, but the damage was done. She saw it. Saw it, and worst of all, he saw it too. I smiled slowly, lifting my drink in a mock toast before downing the rest in one smooth swallow. That was fun, I murmured, turning back to my date. But I think I'm done here. He grinned, placing a hand on my thigh. Want to take this somewhere more private? I leaned in, lips ghosting over his ear. I thought you'd never ask. As we stood, I made sure to brush past Mark's table, just close enough for the scent of my perfume to linger in the air. Just close enough to whisper, "Enjoy your night, darling. Try not to think about me too much." And with that, I walked out, leaving Mark and Vanessa drowning in the wreckage of the game they thought they could win. But they never stood a chance, because I was always 10 steps ahead. And now I was just getting started. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the restaurant, but I could feel Mark's eyes burning into me, the weight of his frustration, his regret, his helplessness. He wanted to be the one in control. He wanted to own the moment. But now he was just another man left in my wake. The night air was cool against my skin as I slid into my lover's car, his hand already possessively gripping my thigh. "That was exhilarating," he murmured, his voice low and eager. Watching him lose his composure like that. "Priceless," I smirked, running a hand through my hair. He thought he could humiliate me, thought he could erase me. Now he gets to sit in that restaurant next to his little prize, wondering why she doesn't feel like enough. He chuckled, starting the engine. "Where to?" I let my head fall back against the seat, exhaling slowly, already crafting my next move. "Somewhere quiet, but don't get too comfortable. The night isn't over yet." As he drove, I pulled out my phone. A new message appeared on my screen. No name, no number, just 2 words. "Nice try." My lips parted slightly, my pulse kicking up. "Mark." I tapped the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A dozen responses ran through my mind, each more tempting than the last. Instead, I smiled and locked the phone, slipping it back into my purse. Let him think he still had an edge. Let him believe he was still in the game. He was just the first piece I had knocked off the board. And now I was ready to play for real. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the restaurant, but I could feel Mark's eyes burning into me, the weight of his frustration, his regret, his helplessness. He wanted to be the one in control. He wanted to own the moment. But now he was just another man left in my wake. The night air was cool against my skin as I slid into my lover's car, his hand already possessively gripping my thigh. "That was exhilarating," he murmured, his voice low and eager. Watching him lose his composure like that. "Priceless," I smirked, running a hand through my hair. He thought he could humiliate me, thought he could erase me. Now he gets to sit in that restaurant next to his little prize, wondering why she doesn't feel like enough. He chuckled, starting the engine. "Where to?" I let my head fall back against the seat, exhaling slowly, already crafting my next move. "Somewhere quiet, but don't get too comfortable. The night isn't over yet." As he drove, I pulled out my phone. A new message appeared on my screen. No name, no number, just 2 words. "Nice try." My lips parted slightly, my pulse kicking up. "Mark." I tapped the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. A dozen responses ran through my mind, each more tempting than the last. Instead, I smiled and locked the phone, slipping it back into my purse. Let him think he still had an edge. Let him believe he was still in the game. He was just the first piece I had knocked off the board. And now I was ready to play for real. The city blurred past as my lover drove, his fingers trailing over my thigh, his touch possessive but distracted. "You're planning something, I can see it." I smirked, resting my chin on my hand as I gazed out the window. "Mark wanted a war, I'm just making sure he regrets starting it." He chuckled. "And what's next? A little more jealousy, a little more destruction?" I turned to him, my smile slow and wicked. "Both, and then some." We pulled up outside his high-rise apartment, the city lights flickering against the glass. As we stepped into the elevator, I leaned into him, letting my fingers trail up his chest. "How do you feel about making headlines?" His brow lifted, intrigued. "That depends. How scandalous are we talking?" I grinned. "The kind that gets back to him, the kind that makes him question everything." As the elevator doors slid shut, I pressed against him, my lips brushing against his ear. "Let's give Mark something to really lose sleep over." He groaned, his grip tightening on my waist. "I like the way you think." And just like that, I had my next move. Mark thought he had me backed into a corner, but by the time I was done, he'd be the one gasping for air, wondering when the game had slipped out of his hands entirely. The next morning, I woke to the soft glow of sunrise slipping through floor-to-ceiling windows. My lover's arm was heavy across my waist, his breath slow and even against my neck. I lay still for a moment, letting the satisfaction of the night before settle in my bones. Mark had wanted a war. I had simply given him the first taste of battle. Carefully, I slipped out from beneath the sheets, padding across the cold floor to where my phone sat charging on the nightstand. Another message waited. "Enjoying yourself." I smirked, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I typed immensely. The read receipt popped up almost instantly, but no response followed. "Good, let him stew in it, let him wonder." Behind me, my lover stirred. "Already plotting?" he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I slid back onto the bed, running a hand down his chest. "Always," he chuckled, pulling me closer. "And what's the next move?" I pressed a slow, teasing kiss against his collarbone before whispering, "Public." "Very public." That got his attention. He pulled back just enough to study my expression, a slow grin spreading across his lips. "You're going to make him watch, aren't you?" I dragged my nails lightly down his stomach. "Oh, I'm going to make sure everyone does." A few hours later, we strolled into the lobby of one of the most exclusive brunch spots in the city. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where whispers traveled faster than the champagne was poured. I had made sure we get a table right in the center of it all. And of course, I had made sure Mark would be here. It didn't take long to spot him. He was seated near the bar, Vanessa by his side, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a mimosa. They looked good together, a carefully curated image of control and confidence. But I knew better. As my lover pulled out my chair, his hand grazing the bare skin of my thigh, I felt Mark's gaze snap to us. I didn't look right away. I let the moment stretch, let him take in every detail. The way I laughed, the way I leaned in just a little too close, the way my dress barely clung to my curves. Then and only then did I meet his eyes across the room. Mark didn't flinch, but his grip on his glass tightened just enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Game on. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark didn't move, didn't speak, but I saw it in his posture, in the way his fingers curled slightly tighter around the stem of his glass. He was unraveling. Vanessa, oblivious as ever, kept talking, laughing too brightly, trying too hard to keep his attention. But she felt it too. The shift, the undeniable weight of what was happening. No matter how perfect she looked at his side, no matter how carefully curated their image was, she wasn't me. I picked up my mimosa, taking a slow sip, my eyes never leaving his. Then, without breaking the stare, I leaned into my lover, resting a delicate hand on his chest as I whispered something only he could hear. He smirked, playing along, his hand settling possessively on my thigh. Mark's jaw tightened. Vanessa finally noticed, her laughter cutting off mid-sentence. She followed his gaze, stiffening when she realized who he was looking at. "Mark," she hissed under her breath. "Are you serious?" He blinked, tearing his gaze away, but the damage was done. She knew, I knew, and more importantly, he knew. I turned my attention back to my date, laughing softly at something trivial, pretending Mark didn't exist. But I felt him watching, waiting, and that's when I knew it was time for the final move. I pulled out my phone, typing a single message. "Game over, you lost." I sent it, watching as Mark's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, his entire body going still as he read the words. A moment later, his lips pressed into a thin line and he tossed his napkin onto the table. "We're leaving," he muttered, standing abruptly. Vanessa looked between him and me, realization dawning in her wide eyes. "You're still in love with her, aren't you?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She pushed back from the table, scoffing, her face twisted with anger and humiliation. "You pathetic son of a..." But Mark was already walking away, his movements stiff, his fists clenched at his sides. I smiled, lifting my mimosa in a silent toast to his retreating figure. He had wanted to break me, instead I had shattered him. My lover leaned in, brushing his lips against my ear. "Satisfied?" I turned to him, my smile slow, victorious. Completely.
Thank you for watching the video. If you want to hear more stories, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Videos are released every day. Good luck to everyone.